Hi. I'm Rachel Kane, of the co-chair of the Hardwick Conservation Commission. So we're very happy that you've come to this meeting. The Buffalo Mountain Town Forest expansion proposal. It's a cold day, so thanks, as Lisa said, for coming out, but it is being recorded and will be available to through HCTV sometime next week. So I'm just going to briefly say what's happening at this meeting. You're going to hear from people from the Trust for Public Land and the Northern Rivers Land Trust and fellow Conservation Commission members. So I just want to take a minute to give a little background on how this project started. Now, a Conservation Commission is an advisory board, town board, and our job is to educate ourselves about the land and natural environment in our community so we can advise the select board or other boards when questions come up. Starting in 2019, we've accomplished a natural resource inventory and a number of talks and events to deepen our relationship and knowledge of the land in our town. A few years ago, some members of the Northern Rivers Land Trust came to a meeting to let us know what they do in the way of land conservation in our area, which is quite impressive. So last summer, when we learned that 329-acre property owned by the Davis family on top of Buffalo Mountain was listed for sale, we knew who to talk to in case there was some way we could help to preserve this little mountain from development. Now, within a number of days, we were meeting with the Northern Rivers people, and were amazed and excited to learn also that the Trust for Public Land had an immediate interest in this mountain also. So that organization, Trust for Public Land, is dedicated to creating and preserving lands for the public. And nationally it's protected, I believe it's 4 million acres. This group makes it their business to help find grant money to create these public lands, which are then given to a town in perpetuity. And these two groups have been behind the new Wolcott Town Forest. We're very grateful that they've been helping us in this project. So our Conservation Commission took a speed course to learn more about how community forests are created and the steps that would need to be taken. After a few weeks of studying and learning about these organizations and the process, we were satisfied and pretty confident that it was a wonderful opportunity for Hardwick. We presented it to the Select Board this past summer, and the Select Board agreed that it sounded good and that the proposal could move on to next steps. And there's so many things that could happen in a town forest on this little mountain. You'll hear more about them, but hiking and biking and ski trails, outdoor classrooms. Best of all, it's so close to the village. You can walk there from the schools and from Atkins Field. And these forests can bring money into town as well through recreation and logging and other ways. Well, this land was listed for about $550,000. With expenses, it's I believe it's an $800,000 project. The Trust for Public Land and Northern Rivers Land Trust folks are experienced and confident that they can fundraise for that amount. Out of that, the town of Hardwick has proposed a contribution of $25,000. There's going to be a floor vote at town meeting day, March 3rd, to approve this money. We think it's a pretty good deal. We certainly hope you'll be there to vote yes on that. And I would just say Buffalo Mountain, to me, it's the absolute heart of our town. It's the background to the village, and it's the view that tells you you're home. So I hope that view and the land can be there for the future to know that wherever we travel, and home was still going to look like home when we get back. And Vermont is changing so much. But it would be nice to hold on to this piece of it. It's really an extraordinary and a rare opportunity for Hardwick, we think. So thank you for that. I'm going to hand the podium over to, is it Lucy, you're not coming up, are you? And Lisa Cathcart, fellow Conservation Commission member, and she will introduce the speakers and we'll carry on. So thank you very much for that.
I want to thank Peter Moskowitz for getting and setting up the beautiful snacks, which we hope you'll have anytime during the meeting. So they're right over there. Bathrooms are through this door and to the left. and we hope you'll enjoy our presentation. Oh, about questions, if you have a question regarding actual presentation points, please feel free to ask. If you have ideas and opinions, we hope you'll hold those for the question and answer part of our meeting today, and enjoy. Thank you. Lucy.
My name is Lucy Zengen. I, along with Rachel, am a co-chair on the Conservation Commission. And I'm just going to introduce our speakers today, or rather have them introduce themselves. First off, we have Hannah Redmond. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. Hi everyone, I'm Hannah Redmond with Trust for Public Land. Rachel introduced TPL, Trust for Public Land. We're a national nonprofit working to conserve land for people everywhere.
Thank you. We also have Jack and Paul from the Northern Rivers Land Trust.
I'm Paul Celo. I live here on Bridgman Hill, and I'm a founding board member of Northern Rivers Land Trust, which we're celebrating our 20th year this year. And I'm here today with Jack Travelstead, who's the chair of the board of Northern Rivers. And Northern Rivers is a conservation organization that works with landowners to accept easements on their property that they want to conserve their property in perpetuity, to prevent development that they don't want to see on their property. So that's our role in it, is to be supportive to landowners.
Thank you. And all the Conservation Commission members for Hardwick, would you raise your hands? So we have Norma Wiesen, Peter Moskowitz, Rachel Kane, who've already spoken to, Kathy Emmons, Joe Nudell, and Mr. Catfire. We also have two other members who couldn't be here with us today. We do have one open spot on the Conservation Commission. If you're interested in this kind of work, you can come and talk to us. And then we are on to our first presenter, Hannah.
Sounds good. Paul, do you want to come advance slides for me? Thank you. Hi everyone. So to start off, I'll just give an overview of town forests, what they are in Vermont, and then talk a little bit about how that pertains to Buffalo Mountain. Paul and Joe will get more into the details of Hardwick and Buffalo Mountain, so this is more of our primer. And we can go ahead and advance a couple slides, Paul, to that first one there. All right. First of all the photos that are in the backgrounds of these slides are either of Hardwick and Buffalo Mountain, of community and town forests in general, or they're along the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail. So scenes that represent what Buffalo Mountain is. So town forests in Vermont, they're a bit of a nebulous subject. It's estimated that 2/3 of the towns in Vermont have a town forest, including Hardwick, with that 70-some odd acre Buffalo Mountain parcel existing up above but south of the Buffalo Mountain summit. They are the key things about town forests is that they're community-owned, community-managed, and the benefits of the town or community forest flow to the community. So they're typically owned by towns, sometimes by a nonprofit, sometimes like a group like the electric department. But the benefits of the town forests, like recreation or financial benefits, flow back into the town and community, and all of the decisions about management are made at a local level, as opposed to, say, a national forest, a national park, or state land. We can go ahead to the next. So some of those benefits, because they're locally managed, the benefits are more robust than you might see from a larger conserved land that's managed elsewhere. There is a huge social benefit that we see through community building. We can exemplify some of that just seeing everyone who's come out today and all of the conversation about this particular town forest. A lot of town forests are used as outdoor classrooms, like this one in Huntington, close to schools where school children can get out and experience nature. There's also ecological benefits like drinking water protection and flood resiliency, habitat protection, and lack of habitat fragmentation. And then finally, there are economic benefits. You can see direct economic benefits like logging that can happen on a town forest managed by the town to bring in town revenue, sugaring leases, or more often, especially in New England where we have these small scale town forests, we see sort of secondary economic benefit where there are visitors coming to town, spending their money in town, and that adds to the overall local economy. So the process writ large is when a community is interested in a town forest, when folks are talking about that, you identify a property. Sometimes that something comes on the market and that gets folks excited and you're off running. Sometimes there's a town who's just really interested in the idea of more publicly managed land at a local level and they go out and look for a property. You identify your partners for acquisition, conservation easements, stewardship, and funding, and we'll talk a bit more about what exactly a conservation easement is. But these, to get the full benefits, to get everyone out to build trails, to make sure that you're incorporating your ecological benefits with other neighboring lands, you need partners, and that's what we're here to talk about. Next, negotiate with the landowner. Trust for Public Land and many conservation groups only work with, go back like okay, perfect, there we go. One more forward. There we go. So negotiate with the landowner. Trust for Public Land and a lot of other conservation groups only work with willing landowners. So you want to make sure that it's a mutual benefit, that the landowner is getting whatever they want out of that exchange, whether that's a good financial outcome, a legacy for their property, or something else that's important to them. Secure the funding. This is where it's really helpful to have partners. A lot of town forests rely on a lot of grant funding, so you need to have knowledge of those grants and spend the time to go out, apply for that funding, and then administer it when it comes in. Community planning. This is sort of the big kickoff step in community planning, and that is what sets town forests apart from other types of land. So the public input process to get to a point where a town forest is representing the community's interests is a big lift on the part of residents, conservation commissions, and then the partner groups. And then finally, town ownership. That's obviously not the last step, since once the town owns a piece of land, it has to be managed in perpetuity in partnership with the land trust, but town ownership allows you to really kick off all of the activities that you've talked about in community planning. Now we can go on. Thank you. So conservation easement. A conservation easement is a voluntary legal agreement that permanently limits uses of the land to protect its conservation values. Not all town forests have conservation easements. Sometimes a funder requires that there be a conservation easement. Or sometimes it's a way to get more funding, or it's just a mechanism that the town can use to say, we, the residents of the town now, know what we want this town forest to look like. We know that people might have a different idea or might feel different pressures, and it's important to us to place some constraints now and set up a plan for what we want the town forest to look like in the future. So here's where we start talking a little bit more specifically about this potential in Hardwick. There are a conservation easement, again, it's a legal agreement, so it can be written a lot of different ways. Different uses can be permitted or restricted. We typically see for town forests that permitted uses include forest management, maple sugaring, trails, education, certain structures that you might need for permitted uses like agriculture or recreational uses, of community events, the ability to host a large human event on the property, snowmobile and ATV use in designated corridors, and hunting and fishing. Those are uses we often see permitted. Uses that are typically restricted, which could be not allowed at all or allowed with limitations, are subdivisions, so breaking the property up into different pieces, commercial, industrial, or residential use, mining, excavation, disturbing the surface in a way that doesn't comply with water quality standards, motorized recreation, and just a little caveat here that there are snowmobile use doesn't typically fall into that restriction on motorized recreation. And then in the case of Hardwick here, we know there are some trails that are commonly used by ATVs, and the intention would be for that use to continue. And then other restricted uses are forest management outside of the approved forest management plan. So that's another community planning process with the county forester to say this is what we intend to do to manage the timber. And anything outside of that would be outside of the bounds of the conservation easement. And then the final thing I want to talk about in this overview is the partners. So this is, again, moving towards this specific project. The partners that have been working on this proposed Buffalo Mountain Town Forest expansion so far are the town of Hardwick, as playing the role of the future landowner and future land manager. And as we move forward, the steering committee is a group of local residents that would hopefully volunteer to shape the future uses of Buffalo Mountain. And that group answers to the select board, but is responsible for doing the legwork of gathering public input and working with the county forester and the other partners to come up with all the future uses of the property. The town would also manage recreation uses and oversee any future timber harvests or sugaring leases. Northern Rivers Land Trust is the future conservation easement co-holder. The Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, that's VHCB up on the screen, is another future co-holder of the easement. That's just the way they work. They provide funding and then co-hold the easement with a local land trust. And that local land trust, Northern Rivers Land Trust, would monitor the conservation easement annually to make sure the terms of that conservation easement were being upheld. And they also support community planning. And then finally, Trust for Public Land, my organization, we play the role of the project management partner. So working on fundraising, landowner negotiations, due diligence, like getting an appraisal, a survey, doing the title work, the legal background of the property. And then we also support community planning along with Northern Rivers Land Trust. And then let's see. All right, I got one more slide to talk more about the steering committee. So I just mentioned that before, that the steering committee is the arm of the town that is coming up with all the ideas of what this town forest should look like. The steering committee is made up of Hardwick residents who are interested in shaping the future of the town forest. Ideally, that's folks with a lot of different perspectives, interests, backgrounds, people who are interested in recreation of different types, foresters maybe with an interest in timber management, folks who are really excited about river ecology. Hopefully you have a lot of perspectives to guide even the questions you're asking to the rest of the community. The steering committee, what they do is they guide the development of the management plan. And this is a term that will come up a lot. There are a number of different plans that shape the town forest. The management plan is the overarching plan. Within it, there's a forest management plan. It connects to the conservation easement. But the management plan is the plan that says, these are the uses that we intend to occur on the town forest, and this is how we plan to carry them out. To develop that management plan, the steering committee does a lot of public outreach that can take the form of surveys, community meetings, walks out on the property, one-on-one meetings. They coordinate with experts like the county forester, and they also work with town staff and the select board to make sure that everything is lining up with what the governing body of the town wants to see happen. And then this question of what's the time commitment, that is something that the steering committee can decide themselves, but I would say around once a month for the rest of the calendar year would be the time expectation for the steering committee, with the option to stay involved after the property has been acquired. So the steering committee is really responsible for getting us to the point of acquiring the property and having a plan to go into action. But sometimes those steering committees stay on and help to set those plans in motion.
Thank you, Hannah. I forgot to mention, you all have these nice colored pieces of paper on your seat. If you have any ideas or thoughts about what you might like to see on the Buffalo Mountain please write them down on that piece of paper and either give them to Norma. Can you raise your hand, Norma? Who will have, or there's a basket in the back, you can put them in. Right now I'm going to introduce Joe, who is going to talk about the significance of Buffalo Mountain. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So my name is Joe Nudell. I'm a member of the Conservation Commission here in Hardwick. I also grew up here in the village, just around the corner. So I've spent a lot of time in my life looking up at Buffalo Mountain, and I think that's true of a lot of people in town. We see it from a distance. It's, you can see it out the window right here. But I think a lot of people don't have a lot of experience actually walking through the land itself. And so for the next few minutes, I'm going to take you on just this brief little tour of the forest, at least as I know it, and show you some highlights there. So to help orient ourselves on the back of your handout, you can see we have a map, and so that's what's shown up here on the left. Outlined in orange is the property that we're considering. So this is the 329 acres. It's 3 parcels. On the north side, it starts down by the river. That's over by the Yellow Barn. It goes up to the summit of Buffalo Mountain, a little over 1,500 feet. It's basically everything you can see from the village. So on this map, we're at the library. So that's on the far right side of this map, under the Hardwick Trails. And so it's basically everything you see out the window here, and a little bit more. The other map that's up here shows a few ecological features of the land that we've documented, including rare and uncommon plant species down by the river, a few other ecological noteworthy zones going up to the top of the mountain. So I'm going to start the tour at Atkins Field. So again, a short walk from here. This makes a natural entry point to the land. There's already existing trails that start there and go up through the property. It's already a focal point of the community. Obviously, we have farmers markets there. Some years we have ice skating, live music, the community gardens, and so on. There's parking already established there, which is nice. And the trails. So this picture up here is on a trail that a lot of people know about and use. This time of year, it's a vast trail. So this is behind Atkins Field. You cross Cooper Brook. There's a little bridge, and it connects over to Buffalo Mountain Road. So this time of year, it's popular with snowmobiles. Again, as Hannah said, that use is intended to be preserved. It's used year-round also as a Vasa trail. People, like me, walk their dogs out there. Run and bike and so forth. So that trail's in really good condition. There are other trails on the mountain as well that go up and through the mountain. They're less good condition, more informal paths, logging roads and whatnot. And then over on the left side of your map, you can see Wright Farm Road, which again is another vast Vasa trail in really good condition. So the steering committee, as Hannah mentioned, could decide to build more trails up there. We could not build trails at all. What we have there is perfectly fine to enjoy the mountain. So I'm going to show you a couple spots that I enjoy up there. So if you'd move to the next slide. I think there's a few spots going up and through the mountain that would surprise people. Like this is a picture of beautiful cascading stream. There's a couple of these spots that I know about. There's some historical artifacts from the old granite industry, the footings of the traveling crane that was used with the old railroad. I think my favorite spots by far are the lookouts. So this picture here is showing a perspective of Hardwick that I think a lot of people have never seen. There's a few other lookouts. This one's kind of high up. You can see, especially this time of year with the leaves down on the trees, there's sort of like this rocky cliff band on the shoulder of the mountain. So this picture is taken from last week. I skied up there and took some pictures from on top of those cliffs. The hike to get there is it's about on par with the hike at Nichols Ledge. It's really not too strenuous or difficult. And again, like easier to access than Nichols Ledge. You can walk there, from here. I'm going to conclude this little tour over now on Wright Farm Road. So this is on the upper left of your map. So where Wright Farm Road intersects with the rail trail. And I want to emphasize just how connected this property is. So obviously here we're on the rail trail connecting us to all sorts of places, the Hardwick Trails, the center of town. There's the vast Vasa trails go up Woodbury Mountain over to the Woodbury Rail Trail and the Woodbury Town Forest. And then there's, these informal trails that go up from the West End, the Industrial Park, Atkins Field. So I think moving over one slide, I have another map. This is sort of a rotated perspective from the one. So if you turn your paper, I guess, clockwise to the right, that's this perspective. And it's really what you see if you're just looking out this window. It's facing west. And so you can see I've drawn some of these informal trails through the mountain and all these connections that we have. So again, the rail trail, hiking trails to the center of town, the west end, Woodbury Mountain on the Vasa trails, and so on and so forth. We're also, as Hannah mentioned, very close to the schools, the forestry program, et cetera. And so I think I have one more slide here. So I want to recall this town planning document that we have. It was put together in 2018. It's the Town Forest Recreation Plan, which was put together with community input. And it laid out a big vision for what we want to do with Buffalo Mountain. And it's interesting to compare the current proposal that we're talking about with the goals that were laid out in this document, because it really accomplishes a lot of the specific goals for Buffalo Mountain that were set out there. Paul, I think if you just click through, there's some transitions. So I just pulled, you can click through all of them. I just pulled a few quotes from this document, and I think as we've seen over the past few minutes, this project really aligns with all of those goals. So we're improving access to Buffalo Mountain, we're linking trail networks to the center of town and to bigger trail networks beyond, building new paths on interesting terrain for more uses. That document talks about pause places. I really like that term. Places to sit and enjoy, like a waterfall or a beautiful view, that kind of thing, and a few more. So, it really accomplishes all the goals that we have set as a town for how to use Buffalo Mountain. So that concludes my tour. So I think we're handing it over to Paul Silo from the Northern Rivers Land Trust.
Thank you so much, Joe, who has spent a lot of time and has the technology skills to be mapping all of those maps, which, not me.
And maybe to forward the slides.
Yeah. Yes, we'll let you forward the slides, because don't give it to me. I'd like to introduce Paul Silo, who's going to talk about the progress in Buffalo Mountain Project.
Thanks, Lisa.
You're welcome.
Before I start, I should mention when I when Lucy asked me to introduce myself and Northern Rivers, that Northern Rivers Land Trust is a regional land trust. Like Vermont Land Trust is a statewide land trust. Northern Rivers Land Trust covers 7 towns, and Hardwick is one of those towns. So it's, just to go through those, it's Woodbury, Wolcott, Walden, Hardwick, Craftsbury, Albany, and what's the 7th? Greensboro, thank you. Okay, so we focus our work on those 7 towns, and so obviously our interest in Hardwick is consistent with that, with the work of this region. So Hannah covered the basics of town forests, community benefits, and organizations involved in their roles. Joe just talked about Buffalo Mountain, highlighting what's in these 329 acres and how community can access them. I'm going to review the process required to make this property part of Hardwick's town forest. So yeah, you go ahead. So just the big picture on process, there are 3 basic elements that are necessary for development of a town forest. The first is a willing seller of the property. In this case, Ken, Chris, and Margaret Davis, Ken's here today, are the current owners of the property. You need funding. Creating a town forest involves raising the funds, mostly through grants, to purchase the property. NRL and TPL, Northern Rivers Land Trust, and Trust for Public Land will do the grant work. And then you need a willing owner that the property goes to, and that's the town of Hardwick. The town of Hardwick would own the property once it's purchased. Next slide. So I'm just going to go through a timeline. This is what's happened so far. NRLT was contacted about the possibility of conserving Buffalo Mountain over the last 10 to 15 years. Different people had contacted me directly, or we found out about it through other people. So we knew there was community interest, but honestly, I had no idea how this might actually happen. We started to look into it. Meanwhile, 4 years ago, Northern Rivers Land Trust was contacted by the Trust for Public Land about whether we would hold the conservation easement on a community forest in Wolcott. We said yes, and that began our relationship with TPL and our understanding of what was required to create a town forest. Jack Travelstead, who I introduced earlier, worked on the Wolcott project and knows the details and knows those details very well. So if there are questions about that, Jack can answer those. So fast forward to 2025, we learned in late May that the Davis property, which includes the summit of Buffalo Mountain, was on the market. So we needed to move quickly. We met with Ken in early June to see if the Davises were interested. They were. And so we had an interested seller, one of the three essential elements. A few days later, NRLT and TPL met with the Hardwick Conservation Commission to assess their support, and they were supportive and voted to support the project and recommend it to the select board, as Rachel said. So next, Hardwick, the Conservation Commission, NRLT, and TPL attended a Hardwick Select Board meeting in late June as audience members and discussed the project briefly and requested the Select Board to put the discussion of the project on their next meeting agenda. They agreed, and we explained that we would be requesting the Select Board to agree to accept ownership of the property if the project team could pull together the other pieces of the project. So initially we went just to sort of let the Select Board know that this was happening and to see if we could get a meeting where, or that we wanted this to happen, and to see if we could get a meeting where we could have a fuller discussion. That meeting happened on July 10th, and at that meeting the Select Board agreed to accept ownership if all the pieces came together. So I want to stop here for a minute, and there has been since then concern expressed that the project was moving too fast and lacked adequate public information and transparency. And these are fair points. The project team is committed to open and transparent conversation about this. And this is not a situation where we're interested in sort of just bullying this through and absent public input. But we're also dealing with a tricky situation, and let me explain. To invest time and energy in the project, we needed to know that we had a willing seller and that the town was a willing owner. If either of those were not possible, the whole thing was off the table, essentially. There was no project. So we needed to establish that first. There was also some urgency because the property was on the open market. Additionally, deadlines for the next round of key grant funding were coming up in the fall. If we missed those, the project would be delayed another year, and the property and/or the funding might no longer be available. So we explained this at the Select Board meetings, and fortunately the Select Board, while it was not an easy vote, the Select Board allowed the project to continue. So the next step was to get a letter of intent from the landowner, which took the property off the market, and that was signed in early September. This allowed TPL to hire an appraiser, a lawyer for title work, and contract for an ecological analysis, and to submit key grant applications. We got the appraisal in early January. The value of the property is $330,000. Excuse me, $530,000. This determines the offer that was made to the owners. Are we there? Yeah, no, it's fine. So here's what's left. So that gets us to where we are now. So what's left to do is we need to get an option agreement signed, which is the next thing. An option agreement has been sent to the owners to sign. Once we receive the signed agreement back, the owners will have agreed to accept the offer of $530,000 and to keep the property off the market while we raise the money necessary for the funding before this the purchase actually closes. As was mentioned earlier, as Hannah mentioned, the project needs a steering committee of interested Hardwick residents that will do community outreach that will inform that will develop the draft management plan for the town and submit it to the select board for approval. Article 7 at the March 3rd town meeting is a question up for a floor vote as to whether the town will appropriate $25,000 toward the $800,000 project costs. And I'll discuss the project budget in a minute. Local fundraising and additional grant applications will be submitted, completed throughout 2026. Additional due diligence will be completed in the spring, property survey, timber assessment, environmental assessment, and a baseline report that documents the property as it currently exists. Those will be drafted. After a final management plan is completed by the fall, we'll then be in a position to actually acquire the property and implement the management plan, which we are currently expecting will happen late in 2026. So here's the project budget. On the left side, you have the expenses. On the right side, the revenues, anticipated revenue sources. So the purchase price of $530,000, due diligence, transaction and costs, $55,000, TPL staffing and overhead, $140,000. Town management endowment. This is money that will be that's in the project budget that will go to the town to set up an endowment for maintenance of the property once the town owns it. $35,000 for NRLT stewardship endowment. Every property that NRLT accepts an easement on comes with a stewardship endowment because the land trust agrees to manage it or to oversee that property, steward the property in perpetuity. And then the budget also includes $25,000 for a community forest program reinvestment, so that essentially it's investing. This project that's moving forward is investing in other projects that TPL is working on for community forest community forests. So that's where. So we get to $810,000. The revenue sources, the Housing Conservation Board, an application has been submitted for $465,000. We had week before last, we had a representative from VHCB walk the property with us and was very encouraging. VHCB feasibility grant.
Yeah, that's VHCB also helps with costs to get projects up off the ground. That's a small grant source they have.
Okay, and then the Nature Conservancy Biodiversity Protection Fund, that grant application has also been submitted for $100,000. As I mentioned, the town of Hardwick is being asked to appropriate $25,000 toward the project cost. That vote will happen at town meeting. And then local fundraising, here budgeted at $25,000, but essentially private foundations and individuals and local fundraising raised the rest of the funds. So most of the fundraising work will be done by Northern Rivers Land Trust and TPL, but the local fundraising effort will be led primarily by the Conservation Commission. So one of the things I wanted to mention is the financial implications of this property becoming a town forest. One is that it removes approximately $5,000 of municipal tax revenue annually from the Hardwick tax rolls. I believe that from after the current reappraisal, the current taxes are about $4,753. But so we're in that neighborhood. Also note, conserving the property will not increase Hardwick's share of state education taxes. It won't impact state education taxes, because those are state taxes. And the I mentioned earlier, $25,000 will go to a management fund out of the project budget that once the town holds the property. So in other words, $25,000 is going back to the town so that they have an endowment in their management fund for the purpose of managing the property.
Paul, would you mind explaining why $5,000 is taken out of the tax base when this is such a large property? It's not $500,000 taken out of the tax base?
Right. Right. It's $5,000 are the taxes paid on the property. So even if the value is $500,000, and that's essentially why the property is valued at about $470,000 by the town. And so the municipal tax rate is about $1. It's a little over $1 currently. So that's how you get to the $5,000 in taxes.
Thank you.
Is that it? Okay. So that's, so yeah, you can just leave that up. So this is the question that will actually be, this is Article 7 that's on the town warning for town meeting. And that it's a floor vote. So in other words, that means this is not something, this is not a ballot vote, that the only people voting on this will be people that are present at town meeting. And it comes up as the 7th item, which is right after the town votes on the total budget for the town. There's one other question having to do with local option taxes, and then this vote will happen as the 7th item. So this is before, if you go to Hardwick town meetings, this is before all of the appropriations that we go, the line item appropriations that are voted on individually. So this will be the first one. So I think that's it.
Okay.
So we can,
Thank you, Paul.
yeah.
So we have some time for folks to, any questions, comments, concerns. We want to hear everything. We have some snacks. If you want to get some snacks and talk around individually, it's your time. Yes, I hope I can answer it. No, I'll refer.
Anybody with insight up here. It's about timber harvest,
Mhm.
since it's kind of multiple entities, the land trust involved in managing the property, and the town creating some kind of force, or I don't know. I guess 2 questions. Does this mean you're creating jobs for the management of the property? Or is that a huge? You're not speaking from the town, but also timber. When it's harvest, what do you guys already have an agreement about? How is it all through the county? I mean, when it comes to making money off of timber, is it the town getting all the money, or you have administrative costs, things like that? But that kind of factors into ownership of the space and how we can have oversight.
Which one of my speakers wants to?
I can take that. Great question. A property of this size is probably not going to have a job created just to manage the property. That's up to the steering committee.
But the revenue from timber will go to the town. The town, if they decide to do a timber harvest, will probably work with a local forester or logging company, and so that local forester will, make what they typically make off of a timber harvest. So the hope is that you're enhancing jobs sort of indirectly by hiring local foresters. That was one of your questions. The other one was about planning.
I think you get both of them, about creating jobs and how the timber sales are arranged, which would be from the committee that's developed through the city or town, right?
Exactly, yeah. So how the timber harvests are arranged, what's going to happen, whether it's for revenue to preventative, cut down a type of tree that is seeing a blight, or to clear a new clearing, whatever that is, that'll be part of the forest management plan, which is developed by the county forester working with the town, the land trust, Northern Rivers Land Trust.
Okay, great.
Thank you, great question.
Yeah.
And questions?
Yeah, and I'll just say, to be clear, none of these decisions have been made, so that the management plan is, as Hannah said, lays this out, and then the select board, that will go to the select board and needs to be approved by the select board before it becomes the plan. So right now, we're talking about what's possible, but not that anything has been decided.
Yes?
Is that management plan amendable over time? Like, say, in the beginning, the plan says you might do foresting in this or that year, and, 25 years from now, I mean, what happens to that plan? Is it set in stone?
Yeah, another great question. Forest management plans, I think, are typically for a decade, and the overall management plan would likely also have a term limit and be required to be updated periodically.
You had a question? Yeah?
Yeah, I have two questions. One is about the map itself and some of these interesting boundaries on the northwest corner and on the east where there's just a line showing the boundaries. And then secondly, where the trail access is. I'd be curious to know. I'll give that to Joe.
Yeah, so
Do you
the
want
interesting
to
boundaries-
have the map up?
Yeah, I
again?
think if you just put up the last map that I shared.
Yeah.
This one?
Yeah.
So the interesting boundaries up here, I guess you asked about, that was the first question. I think that that's just floodplain stuff. There's land that's on, well, the river is moving, as we all know. I think that that's why it looks kind of funny over there. Does anyone else know? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
And that, as far as the trails I was talking about, so Atkins Field is down here. I was talking about right now, the vast trail behind that goes, there's a little bridge behind there. And then there's some kind of informal trails that go up the mountain from that direction and connect over to Wright Farm Road on other vast trails. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
More questions?
So do you
Yes, in the back, the gentleman in the back.
did you say there are two properties being purchased or?
3.
Okay, and so the two big ones I see, what's the third one?
The third one is 10 acres that is essentially on both sides of the Lamoille River. It's the part down by the river.
Like River Lucas and all that.
Yes, right, and the rail trail, that area, yeah.
Thank you. You had another question, sir?
I just spaced out. He might have asked but is there a devoted trailhead like that you have in mind?
Yeah, so this is private property, so there's no like official
Right.
trails yet, but I was, like, Atkins Field, as I said, is a pretty natural point to have like our de facto trailhead. There actually is a real trailhead at Wright Farm Road already, which is not like, by the yellow barn, that's not part of this.
Mhm.
Well, actually, I think that's town land. But that's, used by snowmobiles, ATVs, park there and go up Wright Farm Road, which again is a public road. So that's another option for a trail.
Is there access by the Knights of Columbus building also?
So yeah, I guess if you go back to my other map, there's that the vast trail that goes from Buffalo Mountain Road to House of Pizza. You can get on that. That's part of where the old railroad, the Woodbury Railroad went. So that would be down in this direction. That's where the Knights of Columbus is.
More questions? Yes, Paul?
So, removing this land from the tax rolls and having it become town land, I know when the town exempts a property for various reasons, because it's nonprofit and there's a public good, the town is, I believe, required to pay the education portion of property taxes on that property. I don't know what happens to town-owned pieces of property. Is the town responsible for paying the education portion? It seemed like something up there said the town would not be, but I don't know how that would work.
What I said was it doesn't change the existing situation with town property. But it's a great question, Paul. I don't know the answer, but I think the answer, I'd have to look at the statute, but I think the answer is that if it's town-owned property, I don't believe the town, and maybe Eric or somebody could say, I don't believe the town has to pay education taxes to the state for town-owned property.
Yeah.
The town doesn't pay tax on property the town owns and within town harbor.
Excellent, thank you.
But you do bring up an excellent point, and we've talked about the removing the property from the tax rolls reduces income to, or tax in revenue to the town by about $5,000. But it probably also reduces the amount of education tax paid, because the current property owner would pay a tax bill that includes municipal and educational tax.
Right, it wouldn't affect the other property owners. If it's taken off the tax rolls, in other words, there's not an amount of money that needs to come from the town of Hardwick and paid to the state. It's based on the rate that the state sets, and that applies to the grand list of each person's property. So if the property's off the tax rolls and the town doesn't pay tax, then that would just be eliminated as an obligation for the town. The town wouldn't send that money to the state anymore for that property.
And it wouldn't raise everybody else's tax.
That's right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Eric, could I ask you to come up and maybe sit at the chair and say what you just said so that it gets recorded? I'm not sure if that would be. Oh, you are? You good? Is that good? Okay.
I think so.
Well, okay, great. Because that's an important question.
Okay, other questions, or, yeah?
Let me ask another question that I think I know the answer to, so it's kind of a leading question, but to follow up on this gentleman's question about the fees that could be generated from logging or any other management that developed a profit. I mean, those would go to the town, but undoubtedly, at least some portion of those, more or less, would or could go to management expenses of owning the property, whether it's putting signs up, whether it's mowing open fields, whether it's whatever else is happening. That's, I assume, how those things are often used in this kind of situation.
Yeah, I think could, not would. Depends on the management plan again and on the select board's discretion about where those funds flow. A lot of town forests find that they cover their own expenses with their timber revenue. Sometimes there's excess timber revenue that goes into the town's budget. Sometimes it's a wash. But that's at the discretion of the select board and the steering committee.
More questions? Looks like we've satisfied your curiosity. Please don't forget, yes, Norma.
Can I just remind you
That's what I was just gonna do.
please take the time to jot down those things which you would most like to see a piece of property like this belonging to the town be used for. This will begin, the teeny-weeny beginning of finding out what it is that folks would like to see happen on this property. You can give it to me, or there's a little basket over there where the handouts are. But take a couple minutes and think about, what would you use that property for? What would you do?
Exactly, and if Lisa was just going to say, I think that we have a couple of clipboards.
I'll be Vienna.
You could put your name and email on there if you are interested in learning more about the steering committee, maybe to find out about, being part of that. If you would simply like to receive updates when the next they happen. And there's also a little box if you might be interested in making, donating, send some way. So those are circulating, so please sign up for any interest.
And I encourage you to come to town meeting, bring your friends, and thank you for coming today. Please have some snacks. Please have some snacks.
And we're actually here, and informally, if you have questions and just want to
Yep.
talk with us individually, that's fine.
Yep. Thank you all.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, I'll put this in the back.